Welcome to Prediction Market Movers. My name's Chris Gerlacher with Prediction News, and we've got a great guest for you today. We've got the one and only prediction market trader here himself. He's going to talk about how he got into prediction markets. We're going to talk about the upcoming New York City mayoral race, and then we'll go into some of the mentions and what the industry could look like here once the hype finally dies down and we get back to competing. If you're here with us, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Prediction News, and follow us on X at Prediction News. Now I want to bring in our guest, Prediction Market Trader. You just wanted to go by your title, right?
Yeah, you can call me Prediction Market Trader, or PMT for short. That's what I usually use because it is a pretty long. Right. I got to figure out a better nickname.
PMT it is. Well, I know you have an accounting background. You have a background in poker and horse racing. So you've got that trading, expected value type betting experience. How did you find your way to prediction markets, and what about that made you stay there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I first got into prediction markets actually back in July 2024. So right around the last kind of, election hype going into the presidential race. It's funny because I used to think of myself as like a recent joiner, like only having traded on these platforms like a year and a half. But now in the last few months, they've kind of gone parabolic. There's so many new users in the space. So it almost feels like I've been here a long time, even though I know so many others have been in the space for, 5+ years. So the first trade I ever placed was actually on JD Vance to be Trump's VP pick. So I had been really into politics at the time, kind of casually, not taking it seriously. And then I found, that you could go on a prediction market, pick who you think was going to be the VP candidate, which was crazy to me at the time. Mm-hmm. What's funny is obviously JD Vance ended up winning. I think I got in at like 15 cents, but I didn't hold on to my trade. After spending about 1 or 2 days looking on these platforms, I quickly sold my shares, and I was like, there's no need for me to kind of take a risk here. Because looking at all the markets offered, I quickly saw that there were so many like inefficiencies with just the prices. Obviously, a lot of these platforms, especially at the time, were very new. Volumes, liquidity wasn't as deep. So, there was just ample opportunity to apply kind of old strategies from other types of niches. So, in the sports gambling vertical, arbitrage across sports books is a really big strategy that people kind of historically used. So using something like that on prediction markets, where you have very correlated markets, was something I got really into in the beginning and heavily focused on. And then since I've kind of expanded into taking more directional trades, but that was what first got me into it. And kind of ever since that, I've been completely hooked. You touched on a little bit of my background with poker, horse racing. I've always loved the idea of, trying to find edges. And that's what drew me to poker. That's what drew me to horse racing. And entering the space of prediction markets, where I think it's so much easier for someone to kind of find profitable edges versus poker or other avenues. It was an easy draw.
Yeah. What about prediction markets makes it easier to find an edge than, say, poker or horses?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, you're not really seeing a ton of institutional money yet on these platforms, right? For Kalshi, right, there is, I think SIG has been on the platform for like a year or so, being a market maker in certain markets. But I think for the most part, it's still heavily like peer-to-peer. And I think anytime you have, mention markets is something I've done a lot. Anytime you have lower liquidity, lower volume markets, that really, I would say, aren't as solved, right? These are very new markets. If you look at the world of, say, poker, the last few years, it's blown up with people using what's called solvers, which is kind of trying to get to the stage of game theory optimal poker. In prediction markets, everything's so new. Another example is recently, NFL announcer markets have popped up, right? And this is something that's completely new. So the day that these launched, nobody has solved these. Nobody has gone into the historical thousands of NFL games to see what these announcers are saying, So it just presents this opportunity to whoever is the most clever and, just quick to kind of do their research. Like it really gives you this ability to, find edges, I would say.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Anyone can find an edge if they have the relevant background and expertise and put in the work to go find it.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%.
Hmm. And what are you trading on the New York City mayoral election? Because there are a couple good markets, in that space.
Yeah, definitely. I've been, if you watch my content in the past, I think we were touching on this as well. Like, I've been heavily focused on mention markets. So
Yeah.
last week, I was very focused on the mention market for the debate.
Mhm.
To me, debate mention markets are some of the most fun offerings to have. And I think they're also interesting because, um, with a lot of markets that you trade on mentions, like a Trump speech, for example, right? There's hundreds of historical Trump speeches. So going back to being solved, those are ones where, while there is a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of historical data. But for debates like these, sure, you can listen to a lot of speeches that Mamdani will do, Cuomo, Silva, but a lot of people don't know what to expect. Like going into this last debate, right? Is Silva going to attack both candidates? Is he going to attack one of them? But to answer your question, I guess definitely I'm most focused on the debate mention markets, and just tomorrow we're going to have the second debate, so it's going to be something I'm heavily focused on. In relation to the actual political markets, it's unfortunate that it's not really a close race anymore. So am I going to, wager on Cuomo or Mamdani? I mean, there's a case to be made that maybe Mamdani is almost a lock at this point, but maybe there's a chance that Silva, I mean, I know it's very low, would drop out and Cuomo would see so I don't have any trades currently on the actual political markets, but I am starting to think about, ones that maybe aren't as close, like I think the New Jersey governor race is a little more of like a contested.
Right.
And I guess that last point I would say is like, I'm a very top down trader. So I'm not bottoms up in the sense of building my own models. Like for that mayoral race, there are probably a lot of more politically dialed in people that would have much more like, informed, decisions on like where they're going to be trading there.
Nice. Yeah, I was trading on the first mayoral debate, and I mean, I can pop it up here. I just had $10 each on 4 terms that were priced around 20-30 cents each, and two of them hit. I got Ackman and Puppet, so that helped offset me and pay for that. But funny thing is, we were talking about this before the call too. I'm the opposite of what a good trader is. Once I place the bet on the event, I can't watch the event. I'm terrified to look. I'm just I want to go all or nothing, right? But
Yeah.
you have the more sound strategic approach to mentions. How are you? What are you doing live during a mention market?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I actually just posted like some sort of guide, but it's funny because we're opposites. I don't know if I could place a trade on a mention market and not watch the event. Like that's
Mhm.
just so fun to me. Um, and obviously content wise, it's great to be able to
Yeah.
root for a yes or a no strike. But in terms of like how I typically trade mention markets, I will say um, when it comes to live trading them, at least for the bigger mention markets, and that would be like this debate, there is kind of edge you could find live trading because the liquidity will be deeper. And especially when it comes to like commercial times, things like that, where a market maker is going to be comfortable to place bids out. I would say overall, my strategy for trading mention markets, and also from talking with a lot of kind of top sharps that trade mention markets, it's a combination of, transcripts and kind of that quantitative analysis, analyzing historical word frequencies, and then another term that you'll hear a lot of traders use, which is vibes. You can't purely just data mine historical transcripts because obviously, the world is ever evolving. The issues happening around the world that might influence Trump to bring up one thing or another thing are always changing. So you kind of got to marry the two, and it almost becomes a little bit of an art form. I would say I tend to be more or try to lean more into the vibes side of things where, I have that historical data I'm looking at, but I'm also blending that with, what is some breaking news that might influence, Mamdani to bring something up or Cuomo to bring something up. And I think with the mentioned markets like this, where you can't get a lot of historical data, it does become a lot of vibes and kind of just um, going based off of feel and intuition.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And what are you watching in the second debate, and has that first mentioned market informed what you're looking for and betting on tomorrow?
Yeah, another great one, and I mean, I really love situations like this where you have one debate, and there was not a lot of information going to that first debate. Things were priced as accurately as people could, but now that that debate has ended, you're going to see some of the same words come up in the second debate, as a strike to wager on. So what I always love to do is I really like to look at, okay, what words hit in the last debate? What was the reason they hit?
Mm-hmm.
And are market participants going to either over or undervalue the probability of a word getting hit, right? So if you have a recurring strike, 2 debates in a row, and maybe it was somewhat of a fluke that it came up last debate. So maybe the moderator asked a very specific targeted question that prompted it to be brought up. Some people might look at it in the second debate and say, hey, they mentioned this last time. Surely the odds should increase that this will be said in the second debate from kind of going into the first debate. So I would say, yes, I am going to prioritize transcripts from the first debate and kind of looking at how that debate panned out. And I'm going to kind of look for value where some words maybe could potentially be over or undervalued, depending on if they were said or weren't said in the last speech.
Yeah, or if candidates, got feedback from their campaign teams to adjust their performances in certain ways too. I mean, that can make
Definitely.
that adds another layer of uncertainty as well.
Yeah. And that's what I love about these things. It's like there's so many layers to get into,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm less so politically knowledgeable, but you're way more knowledgeable in politics than me. So like there's an edge that you can kind of factor in of like how are the campaign
Mm-hmm.
decisions of what they want to focus on going to evolve, and how might that change kind of the vibes of this debate going into it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a low sample size of mentioned markets to base performance on, but I was only vibes based going into the first debate market, and I figured, Bill Ackman's going to come up. He might come up just because, Mom Donnie's, is he going to go after Cuomo for, being an establishment guy with big donors and the big machine behind him? Gristetti's, I think, was the, grocery store chain that could come up in relation to Mom
Yep.
Donnie's, state-run grocery store thing. So, I thought, I bought them all because I thought they were underpriced, and I thought if they hit, I would get the necessary return to pay for those markets. And that time it worked out. And that's a longer runner. That's a longer running experiment that I'm, running with these small dollar bets, is to see, yes, the market's always going to be able to come to a number, but there's also this bubble of uncertainty around certain numbers more than others. And that's, I'm in prediction markets for the forecasting. So that's something I'm going to be watching, certainly going into the midterms, but at least in these first three, elections that we have, that's where I'm really enjoying this and watching those.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for anyone that's, getting into prediction markets or interested, always start small. And
Mm-hmm.
I would even take it a step further to say, I want to say when I first got onto these platforms, for the most part, I wasn't even trading. I was like, you don't even have to be placing a trade, but just following markets.
Mm-hmm.
If not to just make you more informed, but also if you want to eventually trade in the future, understanding how these markets evolve as new information comes out is just
Mm-hmm.
really good information to have. So either trade very small when you're starting, so you have some action to incentivize you, to get involved. But if not that, just watch the markets. It can be very enjoyable. And then the last piece I would say is I love mentioned markets, and I think they're one of the most fun markets. I have traded much more than mentioned markets historically. Like I actually was probably most known for trading AI model markets. That
Mm-hmm.
was kind of my specialty in the past. But I think for new users, picking a market niche that is enjoyable to you, that you are naturally interested in, is also extremely important, because the data and research required to kind of build a long-term edge can be very time consuming and difficult at times. But if you're very interested in it naturally, it's not going to be a struggle for you to stay involved with all the information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are great markets for anyone with a really niche interest because there are increasingly more and more markets that are, tailored to you. One of the reasons I think there's so much hype in this industry is because it's so accessible to so many people and you can cater to these niche interests. How do you, what do you think about the current hype in the industry? Do you think it's overblown or do you think it's, pretty appropriate for people who are just coming to prediction markets and seeing what's on offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think hype is definitely like a good word to use with what we're seeing in the industry right now. Like I said, I've been on prediction markets going back to July 2024, and what I've seen in the last 2 months is just unbelievable. I mean,
Mhm.
a South Park episode dedicated to prediction markets that mentions both of the top platforms.
Mhm.
Like I would have never expected that to see that, and then also just what you're seeing with these new valuations, it's getting completely kind of blown up. Um, Whether or not it's all like just hype. I mean, I would say right now, I definitely feel it's not just hype right now.
Mhm.
I think like this increasing hype is tied to the dramatic increase with volumes. Like obviously, Kalshi with sports lately, volumes have been going parabolic.
Mhm.
Um, what is going to kind of remain to be seen is just give this more time. Like what does this look like a year from now is really exciting for me to think about
Mhm.
because, you know, on any given day, prediction markets are changing dramatically, like day
Mhm.
by day, week by week. I mean, I've never been this close to like involved in an industry that's just every week is
Mhm.
completely changing. So I think it remains to be seen. What I'm looking for to you know, I think with the nature of these products, right? Like you said, they can almost apply to everyone. What I really would like to see for these to get as big and parabolic as they can would be eventual institutional adoption.
Mhm.
And I think that's where volumes will kind of hit their peak liquidity, and that's where these really become just massive companies that are like huge infrastructure. I think is getting to institutional adoption.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, Underdog Sports took they've announced that they're intending to use Kalshi to, manage and hedge some of their exposure as well, which was, that was an early argument in Kalshi sports lawsuits too, that, other sportsbook companies could be Kalshi customers. And now, assuming Underdog actually follows through and does that, I think that is an unexpected boost in that particular line of legal reasoning for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think obviously now with these companies fully focused on growth, you're going to see a lot of new fun culture markets that are going to play really well with marketing and growth. And maybe they won't do a ton of volume and liquidity, but they're fun markets. They're going to attract
Mhm.
new users. But the end goal is that going back to that real world value in the sense of like hedging events, and that's where I would see a lot of institutional adoption.
Mhm.
um, I mean, if you think about the presidential election, it's like historically, right, if
Mhm.
you want to hedge against Trump or Kamala winning, you buy a specific basket of stocks,
Mhm.
rather than getting just direct exposure. So um, that's one of the clearest markets that have these hedge opportunities. Obviously, Fed interest rates are great ones. A lot of the economic indicator markets, but I think as this um, you know grows, finding more markets that would cater to actual institutional participants is going to be really big because I think there's so much more that can be discovered in terms of
Mhm.
offerings.
Yeah. What do you think this industry looks like post hype when we're kind of, after the badge wars and these two companies, Kalshi and Polymarket primarily are competing more intensely with each other. And you have this, other layer of startup companies, carving out corners of the industry for itself.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I will say is I think competition in any market, I don't think anyone would really disagree with this, is like an overwhelmingly good thing. I mean, I think for end consumers, it's just going to be great for everyone having competition. So think that's great for the industry. And what I see in like the next year or two, the first thing is I think I expect to see a lot of people building software platforms on top of prediction markets.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now as a trader, to me, there really hasn't been many tools that have emerged as kind of the definitive, tool that someone's using on top of prediction markets. So I think that has a lot of room to grow. And then especially like as you have hopefully institutional, money trading on these platforms, they're going to want, terminals, things like that to allow them to be more complex, manage risk.
Mm-hmm.
So one piece of it is I think there's going to be a lot built on top of prediction markets. The second piece I think is if this continues to grow, as it continues to grow, I think the media landscape is going to significantly change, both in the, maybe I'll pause on saying significantly, but I think you'll see prediction markets get integrated significantly more with, media. And that just means traditional media using prediction markets more to inform decisions. And, that also means seeing maybe prediction market specific media outlets, like what you guys are doing, like what
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to do with some of my content. I think those will start to get much bigger. And then I think just on these platforms as a whole, I think the bull case is that in a few years, assuming everything is going well, I think you have institutional platforms trading on these, and that's where I see liquidity and volumes just kind of skyrocketing. And then that's where I also see a lot of economic markets that provide some incentive for
Mm-hmm.
players to actually hedge risk. I also think clearly sports are going to continue to be a huge part of these platforms. I
Mm-hmm.
think undoubtedly for the next year, they're going to be a very large percentage of volume and liquidity, and probably only continue to grow in the next few months. So I think the first few years it's going to be about that sports, but I think once they get that unlock with finding more like real hedging opportunities, like you brought up underdog, but also outside of that, I think that'll
Mm-hmm.
be huge.
Sure. You mentioned, there's not the definitive tool as a trader yet. What are you hoping is developed in this space over the next, few months or even 12 months?
I definitely think the first thing that comes to mind is like a really well built out trading terminal, I would imagine, like especially um, it won't be used as much or for like retail participants, but like for maybe people that are market making more seriously or more serious directional traders. I think having really well built out terminals will be a big thing. And what I will say is in that space, there is a lot of competition. I think I get messaged by about 10 people a week that are saying they're building a terminal and to give feedback on it. So definitely a lot of people are getting involved. And also I think you'll see a lot of outside investment as well as people kind of race to build things on top of it. I will say the only tool that I pay for, which is really funny, for prediction market trading after having used it for a year and a half, is a tool that is more of like a data repository for all historical transcripts. It just saves me a lot of time. It's a couple $100 a month, and it's very worth it for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, it's not just the oracles or the AI generated quick markets. It's these startups and companies and products that can cater to anybody who's trading on whatever their niche area of interest is as well. I think that's going to be I think that's a huge untapped market so far. So startup folks, entrepreneurs, if you're watching, I think the prediction market industry is going to indirectly open up just a ton of opportunity for new companies.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's really funny too, because from talking to other traders in the space who have found a lot of success, almost everyone builds their own like proprietary tools or maybe internal models. And obviously, if somebody builds a very successful tool at predicting an outcome, in almost every case, the most profitable use of that is to use it themselves and be profitable on it, which is why you're not going to see that, publicized as a tool for everyone to use, so I think that's where the space is definitely going to get interesting. And I think to your point, there's so much opportunity right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a lot about what could go well about the industry and what the potential for the industry is. Is there anything you're worried about that could become kind of an anvil around the industry's neck, once we're post hype and we start to see some cracks or unresolved problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think two headwinds I would probably talk about. The first one, obviously, I'm not an expert in, but obviously, regulatory wise, that's to me the biggest risk in this industry. As you're seeing, sports volumes are getting very large. From what I've read, Kalshi has been doing very well defending their position, but obviously not an expert there. But that's what I think is the biggest risk, number one. But number two, I would say is to institutional adoption. I think, you know, if an institution is gonna be wagering significant sums of money on these platforms, I think the markets that they're going to be focused on are going to be kind of definitive markets. So when it comes to things like the contracts and resolution criteria, I think those are going to continue to improve, and I think that's going to be kind of a somewhat of a risk to institutional adoption. Is like, if you're, like I said, if you're an institutional participant, you want to know very clearly in what scenarios is this going to pay out versus not. So I think, like, if institutional money is on these platforms, they're going to be focused on Fed rates and more defined things versus like more judgmental markets that you can sometimes see offered.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking, I'm looking at some of the early projects in the crypto space because Kalshi and Polymarket are both investing heavily in crypto builders where you can experiment as much as you want. And then, regulated platform like Kalshi or Polymarket US, when it eventually launches, it can just take what actually works in crypto and adopt it in the, CFTC regulated space as well. But, I know there's some murmurs about, projects in crypto where you can place leverage trades on prediction markets, and that makes my palm sweat a little bit. I think if responsible trading does not become a fault line in the industry before those products launch and gain traction, I think that's going to kind of force the issue to a head in a way that I think the traditional finance, at least in the United States, hasn't quite had to grapple with in the same way as the state regulated gambling industries. So I know that might be a fault line. I know it's coming. I just don't know how soon or how explosive, that's going to be.
Yeah, I have seen, murmurs about that and projects being built on some of the platforms around kind of leverage, because I think to newcomers to the space that come from, like you said, a crypto background, I don't myself personally, but there are a lot of them thinking, like, you see leverage everywhere in crypto. Why don't you see this on prediction markets? But it's funny because I feel like adding leverage to a prediction market it's a very difficult thing to kind of solve for, especially if you're putting up positions as collateral, because obviously when it comes to prediction markets, very frequently, like, you're either right or wrong. So your collateral is either going to be worthless in a day or it's going to be, so I think having a mechanism to even offer leverage is going to be difficult if people are looking into that, but I'm sure there's smarter people than me, but I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, I think, you could see platforms that end up like prediction market platforms that price based on like a bonding curve or something like that, where you get some more steady and predictable pricing and positions. But that'll be a thorny problem to untangle anyway. So it may not even, maybe the leverage products aren't even the, responsible trading, catalysts that make that a big issue for the industry either. So we will see. There are a ton of interesting, especially the AI projects, I think, like PNP Exchange, where you can just, really quickly on your X feed, AI generate settlement terms and a market. And if that can be done automatically, talk about, micro betting at scale, right?
Yeah, but it's a really interesting idea. I would definitely say, for me, I am probably pretty bearish on create your own market. I know a lot of people are looking on doing it. I think from my perspective, it's like the resolution criteria, right? You look at these platforms like Kalshi, where, they have dedicated teams building contracts as their full-time job to think about the rules and things like that. And sometimes there's going to be outliers that they don't always have accounted for in the contracts, in which cases they'll usually end up paying out both sides, so this is, there's just so many potential possibilities to where, like, that you have to account for, that even these professionals sometimes will not account for them. So I think with create your own market, that's a big risk, the resolution criteria. And then I also think when it comes to like liquidity,
Mhm.
with create your own market, it'll be difficult to ensure you don't have a ton of duplicative markets popping up everywhere because people created them with slightly, I mean, granted, I know there's smarter people than me that are going to think about solutions to this and whatnot. Um, but overall, I don't think create your own market is the direction that I would like to see these
Mhm.
markets go. What I would love to see is maybe a more formalized process for proposing new markets, maybe even some type of voting system to kind of ensure that people really want it. Because right now, you are seeing that built out on some of these platforms, but right now it does feel a little more casual, the mechanism to get new markets where people are kind of messaging in Discord channels or on Twitter.
Mhm.
So I think seeing that more formalized would be a good thing.
Yeah. So you want the security of a expert team who will, take care of your resolution processes and, make sure you have a market that people actually want to trade in and have the liquidity to, submit trades.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think like contract resolutions is going back to kind of existential risks. Like
Oh yeah.
that is, a big risk in making sure you have sound contract resolution criteria. Um, Not even from a regulatory point of view, but even just as a business, because obviously if that happens too many times that you have to kind of settle both sides, it's not going to be, a good solution in the long run. Um, so I think that's going to be, very important to definitely focus on.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, PMT, thanks so much for coming on. It was great to talk to you, get your thoughts on the industry and the mentions in New York. Where can people find you and follow you if they want to watch your stuff?
You can follow me on X at Predem Trader, Prediction Market Trader. I'm typically streaming every day and posting daily content. I'll be expanding to additional platforms soon.
Very cool. And you just published your first article on X as well, right?
Yes, my first article on kind of some strategies for trading mentioned markets. I'm not the best mentioned market trader in the world, but I think for new users, it can be really helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I will see you in the mentioned markets myself. And, if I have any successful long-term trading strategies, I'll be sure to, we'll be sure to talk about them later.
Great. Well, great catching up with you, Chris. Really enjoyed it.
Great to meet.